Hello everybody and welcome to Scripting Security. This is my outline. We'll talk about some general guidelines. We'll get language specific with some specific languages. Okay, why do we want to talk about security? Well, this is one of my favorite cartoons. SKCD is a really kind of geek cartoon place, but it has some really funny cartoons. This is about SQL injection, and this is a mom. And if you follow through, it said, did you really name your son Robert? Drop table students. Now, what happens here if you don't speak SQL? This actually stops a command line and it starts another one. Drop table students sounds about like what you figure it would do. So, this is the why. There's another thing. XSS is not a 90s singing group. It stands for cross-site scripting. And it's another reason why you need to be careful about scripting security. Of course, there's always the inside threat, and then there's the threat technically known as oopses, like I didn't mean to do that. So, okay, so she said sanitize your inputs. Scripting languages we've learned are not strongly typed. You know, we talk about duck type in Python, that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. So, you also have SQL injections, a well-known hacking method. And here's an example. Okay, here's where you ask for a last name, and then there's your search string, and that looks pretty innocent. And then you can execute that as a SQL statement. Well, that's okay, except if last name equals Mike. Okay, you've closed out the parentheses there, the apostrophe there, the quotation marks, and this is a new line. Create user backdoor, identify by let me in, grant DBA to backdoor. Then you have the comment field so it doesn't error out on the rest of this. Well, what happens then is you just created a user called backdoor, and he's got DBA or database administrator privileges. Okay, cross-site scripting is much the same idea, except it's kind of like SQL injection for web pages. And here's an example. Okay, there's your overview. Scroll down here. Okay, what happens here is you say get string name, and it basically executes it. But it says that if the value of the names are well behaved, they put in there what they're supposed to, it will behave itself. But if it doesn't, then you don't know what you're getting. You see, and here's a case where it grabs and actually grabs a cookie, and you don't want anything grabbing cookies, even in your kitchen or in your script. Okay, another example. Okay, then you have input type search value potatoes. Okay, that's fine if you want to search for potatoes, but suppose instead that you actually start putting some HTML code on there that actually does something. You could actually run a script. So that's cross-site scripting. And examples, well, you'll tell me when you work on your scripting presentations, your security presentations. Okay, dynamic scripting is where you do a script to write a script, which is very, very powerful, but it can be very, very dangerous. Here are the commands that actually run those, and what happens, like in Python, it will execute whatever string you have there. JavaScript's the same idea, but JavaScript, since it's right out there on the internet, you really got to think twice. Okay, your scripting environment. This is how part of what you can do to help. Be conscious about whether you want to run your script at a workstation or on a server. If you run it on a server, you're right there where the action is, but you can also mess things up quicker. You won't want to use, but if you use a user account, then you have to log in. There's actually a person physically there while you're working on it. That's nice, but a lot of scripting does after hours, and it's periodic scripts using a service account. You can either use a service account on a workstation, which I used if I needed to do something like produce a spreadsheet or send email, or you can do it on a server. You got your choice of authentication. You can use a password. Don't store your password in plain text, even temporarily, because it's a habit that you'll forget about it, and the next thing you know, your password's out there for everybody to see. Operating system integrated, if you have some sort of LDAP server, then you can use that to authenticate, and then you don't need a password at all. That's even better. Okay, authorization, you need to separate out your test and your production environment, make sure there's a clean distinction between the two, and test everything on test. The idea of minimum privilege is that you don't want something to have administrative access if it doesn't need it. If it's just going to read something, just have it as a read only. Okay, getting into some language specifics. The main thing with Bash, and there's my information there where I got it from, this website. They say don't use Bash. Use a higher level language because they have better security mechanisms. There's a set, just like there was a set in Perl where you set your security or all that, and that sets your useful option. And use your quotes to prevent picking things up you didn't intend to. In Bash, a lot of times you can have a string without quotes in it, but you don't know necessarily where the string starts or stops. And here's a neat little tool here. And this is something that you can run an example. Well, let's just see. Okay. And it runs and it gives you some warnings that these aren't exactly working, and it can hone in on those for you. Okay, Perl, and this is the man I got it from here. Stay away from these commands. These commands that essentially run a text string as a command, and it can be very, very powerful. If you set your path, you set your unique identifier that kind of limits the options. Make sure that your script doesn't stray. Race conditions. A race is where somebody's trying to beat somebody else, and a race condition is where the hacker is trying to beat you to the punch. For example, if you have something that goes through a loop and it does things, and they want to interject something, they'll try to get it before it gets through the loop. The other thing common with a race condition is you send out a command or a question to a server, and they intercept it and send it back before the regular server does. Okay, you could also have buffer overflows. That's kind of rare in Perl. That's where a buffer is, say, it's designed to handle 512 characters. You put it under 514 and to just see what it does. Okay, Python. General, use most recent version. That's a good idea for every language, scripting or otherwise. Set debug equals false. That way they don't get debug information, so they can tell about your environment. And never commit anything with a password. GitHub or something, once you put it on there, it's on there forever. And this is the person that I got this information from. Okay, JavaScript has got all sorts of cheat sheets that you can do and to make sure that you don't do cross-site scripting. Okay, this is a little bit jumbled. Know your language, know your environment, stay current on threats. And those are the main 3 things you can do to script safely. Thank you for listening.